Now, as we're continuing in the teaching, three dimensions of a total man. On Sunday, we began by sharing how absolutely critical it is for men of God to understand that God has given us literally the authority to name, meaning to decree, to declare, to organize, to structure all of the elements of his earth. We already know, of course, that he's given mankind dominion over everything that creepeth within the earth, according to Genesis. But we go a little deeper than that with the male man, as we deal with the authority of the male man if he is in covenant with God to name, to order, to structure all of the elements of the earth. The Bible makes it clear. We started in Genesis on Sunday. We started in Genesis chapter 2, where the Lord takes Adam, the male Adam, and places him in the garden and says, now, Adam, here's your responsibilities. 1, dress the garden, and 2, keep the garden. Actually, the Bible has it the reverse, to keep the garden, and 2, to dress the garden. The keeping of the garden, that is to have the authority over it. It is within your watch care. It is under your authority. But secondly, to dress it. That is to refine, to culture it, to train it, to develop it. Two elements, then, that God says the male man, the male species of mankind, has his authority to do when he is in covenant with God, is to have the authority to structure, that is to say what shall be and it shall be, even within the earth realm. And then secondly, to refine, to develop, to put your own, if you will, taste to it, because your taste should be what is God's taste. We should know the mind of Christ. We should be as God in the earth. And the Bible is very clear about that. Why call you yourself mere men when I have called you God, small g? We know, of course, that God, the Father, Jehovah God, is omnipotent, omniscient. But isn't it an incredible finding that God, in all of his omnipotence and omniscience, has determined of his own free will that he would take the male man that he has formed of the dust of the earth, and that he would take that man and give him the authority over everything that creepeth in the earth. Now, God gave Adam, the male man, the authority to name everything that God created that walked the earth as a living creature, a living being. The fowl of the air, he gave Adam, the male man, the authority to name it. So now let's go a little further then. God gave the male man, before the woman was even created from the male man, God gave him the authority to keep, organize, and structure the elements of the earth, and 2, to dress, develop, and train the elements of the earth, and then to name the elements of the earth, every living thing within the earth. That is, you tell it what it must be, you tell it how it must operate, and that's what it shall be. All of this being predicated on a key factor. Are you in covenant with God the Father? Are we in obedience? Why do we know it requires a covenant with God the Father in order to have the authority? Because there is authority delegated by man. But man's authority over the earth is not authority delegated by man, but authority delegated by God. Watch. The Lord creates and gives the male man this authority before the male man was formed. Watch this now, in totality. In other words, if we look in Genesis, we find that in Genesis, first of all, chapter 1, that God has already formed man, or said, let us make man in our image. So he's still dealing with this male man, that is the progenitor or the beginning of now what ultimately becomes woman, because he takes woman from the male man. So we know that the male man ultimately gets formed of the dust of the earth. But for the woman, he does not have to reach back to the dust of the earth. He merely takes woman from the side of male man. Very important part there, because in other words, everything that is necessary within the earth realm should be able to be spoken, decreed, or created out of the male man, or the seed of the male man. That's why a female, a woman, can take the seed of a male man and bring forth another life. She has no ability within herself to create another life. but with the seed of the male man germinating with the egg of the female woman, then because of the impartation of the male, because of the implantation of the male, then there comes forth new life. So should be the elements of the earth. Everything within our earth's atmosphere that we need to be rejuvenated, regenerated, transformed, should come forth out of the seed of a man in covenant with God. Let me say that again. Everything we need that is to be regenerated, transformed, renewed within the earth realm should come forth out of the declaration or the activation or the implantation or the impartation of a man, male man, in covenant with God. It is important to recognize that God gives not only the authority to the man, but he gives authority to the man for an assignment of God. Ephesians 2:10 says that we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, regenerated in Christ Jesus, ordained unto good works, which God gave us before the foundation of the world. Now, there's a lot of parts of that, and we've taught many different times about Ephesians 2:10. We've taught a whole series predicated on Ephesians 2:10 entitled Born to Win. We've taught out of Ephesians 2:10 about the elements of inevitable success. But now we look at it in yet even a little deeper portion, and that is to understand that our assignment in the earth as men in covenant with God predates time itself. God assigned man the authority to handle the elements of the earth before time itself even existed. Now that's important, because that means then when we are truly walking in covenant with God, we walk in an authority that time places no boundary over. Once spoken, it can be. And there's where Abraham learned to walk. Abraham walked in such a confidence with God that he was able to speak and call those things that be not as though they were. Why? Because Abraham walked in such a faith that he predated time itself. Let's think about that for just a moment.